It's me. This is Zach the History Dog, and welcome to another episode of our channel where we share stories from Canada's past. Today we're talking about Leo Major, one of Canada's greatest war heroes and the only Canadian to receive the Distinguished Conduct Medal twice, earning him the nickname Two-Time Leo. Let's dive into it! Leo Major was born on January 23, 1921, in the small town of St. Boniface, Manitoba, which is located about 45 minutes outside of Winnipeg. His family were French Canadians and had moved there from Ontario in hopes of creating a better life for themselves. When he was just a baby, his father took work as a cook at a local hotel. Then, when Leo was around 7 years old, his father left the family, leaving them in a difficult financial situation. His mom then went to work as a maid to support the family, while his brother, Guy, dropped out of school to get a job and help support everyone. It was a really tough situation, but they were not alone. The entire community pitched in to help. They were strong Catholics, and their faith gave them hope during these dark times. And even though they didn't have much money, they always had food on the table. Leo's mom made sure of that. When Leo was 13 years old, he got into some trouble. He and a couple of his friends were playing with some fireworks, but things went wrong and some buildings caught fire. It wasn't long before the police were knocking on his door. Even though he was just a kid, his mom told the cops that if Leo did something wrong, she would deal with him herself. She knew that this incident was a wake-up call, and that her son needed some discipline, so she sent him to live with his aunt and uncle in Ontario. Life there was strict. His uncle ran a farm and expected everyone to pitch in and help out. At night, Leo slept in a barn with the other workers, and during the day he milked cows and fed chickens. But it was good for him. His uncle taught him the values of hard work, responsibility, and patriotism, which all contributed to shaping him into an outstanding young man. As a teenager, he began working at a gas station and saving every penny he earned. All he talked about was adventure. When he turned 16, he lied about his age and enlisted in the army, hoping to see some action. But his mother found out and immediately went to the recruitment office to complain. Thankfully, they let him go and told him that he was too young to join up. Leo respected his mom, so he listened to her and waited until he was older. But he kept himself in shape and learned everything he could about weapons and combat. Finally, when he was 18, he joined the army and began training as a sniper. He excelled at this job because he was calm under pressure and an excellent marksman. But this was during the Second World War, and he and all of his friends wanted to see some action. That's why, when Leo heard that his buddy Joe was going overseas, he begged his sergeant to let him join him. Of course, the sergeant said no, but luckily, while Leo was waiting for his turn, a replacement was needed for a different unit and he jumped at the chance. After months of traveling, Leo finally arrived in Europe and was sent straight to fight in the Netherlands. He was a bit overwhelmed at first, but he quickly got down to business and started scouting out enemy positions. On April 11, 1945, he and one of his best friends, Joe, also known as John Patton, were sent on a reconnaissance mission to the Dutch city of Zavala, whose residents were being held hostage by German forces. Their plan was to sneak into town undetected, identify key locations, and leave by 5:30 a.m. But things didn't quite go according to plan. They had just made it into the outskirts of town, when suddenly, Germans opened fire on them. Leo and Joe hit the deck and returned fire. Unfortunately, Joe was hit and killed, but Leo was determined to finish the mission. Joe's death gave him a fire in his belly, and he fought like a man possessed. After finding cover, he called in reinforcements and then set off towards the city center. The Germans were still shooting at him, but he kept moving. Now more desperate than ever, they tried to flee. Leo killed 2 more Germans and wounded several others. But as he continued on, he realized that no matter how many Germans he killed, there seemed to be endless numbers coming to take their place. Eventually, he came across a group of armed civilians. At first, he thought they were Germans, but then they started yelling at him in Dutch. It turned out that they were actually Dutch rebels who wanted to help. They led him to a hiding spot and gave him some food and water. Then one of the rebels, Jake, offered to show Leo around the city so he could identify important landmarks for the Allied troops. Together, they dodged artillery fire, rubble, and dead bodies until dawn. By 5:30, they had made it to the train station exactly as planned. Leo saw that the Germans had placed many machine guns around the building, but it looked like the city itself was largely undefended. Realizing that the hostages must have been evacuated, he felt a pang of sympathy for the people of Zavala. Although they had suffered greatly, their homes and businesses remained untouched. He didn't want that to change. When Leo met up with the rest of his squad, he told them what he had seen. So when the Allied troops entered the city later that day, they did so without firing a single shot. The townspeople cheered and celebrated. Leo had saved them. For his bravery, he was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal, the second highest award for bravery in wartime. This is a rare honor, especially for snipers, who are typically only awarded military medals for killing high-ranking members of the opposing team. This was not the case for Leo. His medal recognized his bravery as a person and a soldier. In total, Leo served 7 years in Europe, fighting against the Germans, and he was involved in over 35 major operations. He saved countless lives and earned several medals and commendations for his service. But once the war was over, he wanted to come home. He missed his family and wanted to start a life of his own. So in 1946, he returned to Canada and began working as a miner in his hometown. But soon after, he received news that changed everything. His commanding officer had recommended him for the military medal for his actions in Zul. He was excited to hear this because the MM was the highest honor that a soldier could receive. But unfortunately, when the medal arrived, it wasn't what he expected. The citation on the back read, "For most conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty." Throughout the operations in the Zul area, he displayed the highest standard of marksmanship and courage. He was devastated. All the stories about his heroism had been wiped away in favor of statistics. He had rescued hundreds of civilians, but they weren't interested in that. All that mattered was his kill count. This destroyed him. He couldn't believe that his country would send him to war, then try to erase his humanity when it was over. He felt lost and hopeless, so he turned to alcohol to numb the pain. Thankfully, his brother intervened and convinced him to seek professional help. In therapy, Leo learned how to cope with his PTSD and reintegrate into civilian life. He then began working as a mechanic and eventually married his sweetheart, Juliette. They had a big wedding and all of his old army buddies showed up to celebrate. Things were looking up, but Leo never forgot what happened to him. He used his story to warn other veterans about the dangers of PTSD and the importance of seeking help. He became an advocate for mental health and helped raise millions of dollars for veteran charities. He was so passionate about this cause that he was willing to do anything. Once he was invited to a radio show hosted by a psychologist named Dr. Joyce Brothers. They talked about his experiences in detail, and afterward, Dr. Bros asked him if he would be willing to appear on a television show called This Is Your Life. In this series, people were surprised by the people they had impacted the most in their lives. Leo agreed, and on February 22, 1984, he was brought on stage in front of a live audience. His old army buddies were there, along with his wife and kids. He had no idea what was happening. But when the host asked him why he was the bravest soldier he had ever seen, he understood. It was a tribute. Everyone was there to tell him how much they appreciated him and what he had done for them. He was in shock. He had never received an apology or thanks from anyone in the government before. He had been shunned and forgotten, then remembered for all the wrong reasons. This moment right here was the only time he allowed himself to accept the war and move forward. In 1993, Leo was awarded the Order of Canada, the country's highest honor, for his contributions to veterans' causes. But sadly, Leo passed away on October 12, 2008, at the age of 67. He is buried in a cemetery in Manitoba. His legacy lives on through the Canadian War Museum and the commemorative area at the Canadian Peacekeeping Monument in Ottawa. What did you think? Do you know any stories of Canadian war heroes? What do you think we should talk about next? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'll see you next time. Bye!